out of the vehicle now.
Can I ask what this is about?
I said step out now.
I'm reaching for my credentials. I'm a federal agent.
Officer Dale Harris didn't police neighborhoods. He hunted them. On the afternoon of March 4th, he spotted Damon Webb, a black man, sitting quietly in his car, and that was all the reason Dale Harris ever needed. He snatched the door open, grabbed him by his collar, dragged him across the concrete like he was nothing, and threw him in a cell without blinking. What Officer Harris didn't know was that the man whose face he just pressed into the pavement was an active FBI agent, and that one decision was about to incinerate his career, his colleagues, and cost his city $10 million. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to smash that subscribe button for more stories you don't want to miss. Damon Webb was 38 years old, 14 years deep into a federal career that most people in law enforcement would never reach. He didn't talk about his work at dinner tables or bring it up at barbecues. He was the kind of man who moved quietly and let his record speak. And his record said he had worked 3 major organized crime investigations, 2 interstate drug trafficking cases, and had spent the last 8 months embedded in an undercover operation that couldn't afford a single mistake. On this particular afternoon, he was off the clock. Plain clothes, no suit, no tie, just a gray jacket, dark jeans, and the black shades he almost always wore when the sun was out. He had stopped his car on Callaway Street to take a phone call. Nothing more, nothing less. Engine off, hazards on, a man minding his business in broad daylight. That was enough for Dale Harris. Harris had been on the force for 12 years, and in those 12 years had accumulated 8 formal complaints, every single one of them filed by black men, every single one of them buried. He wasn't the kind of cop who hid what he was. His precinct knew, his supervisors knew, and because nothing ever happened, Harris had come to believe that nothing ever would. He rolled up on Damon Webb's car with his partner, Officer Glenn Tarwick, and the two of them moved with the casual confidence of men who had done this 100 times and walked away clean every single time. Harris knocked on the driver's window. Not a tap, a knock with his knuckle, hard and deliberate, the kind designed to startle. Damon didn't startle. He ended his phone call, looked at Harris through the glass for one calm second, and rolled the window down. Step out of the vehicle. No badge displayed. No reason given. No greeting. Damon kept his voice level. Can I ask what this is about? I said step out. I'm going to reach for my credentials. Damon announced it clearly, the way federal agents are trained to do, and moved his hand slowly toward his jacket. I'm a federal agent. Harris didn't slow down. He didn't step back. He looked at the badge wallet Damon was already lifting into view, looked at it the way a man looks at something he has already decided doesn't matter, and reached into the vehicle. What happened next took less than 30 seconds. The door was yanked open. Damon was grabbed by the collar and pulled from his seat before he could say another word. His black shades were knocked from his face as he hit the side of the car. His badge wallet hit the passenger seat. His phone hit the floor. He was pulled down to the concrete, cuffed with his face against the ground, while Tarek stood behind Harris and said absolutely nothing. People on the sidewalk stopped walking. A woman across the street put her hand over her mouth. Nobody intervened. Harris didn't explain himself, didn't radio in a charge, didn't pick up the federal credentials, sitting in plain sight on the passenger seat. He walked Damon to the cruiser, put him in the back, and closed the door. The drive to the station was silent. No questions asked, no paperwork explained. Damon Webb sat in the back of that police car, cuffed, and said nothing, because he knew something Dale Harris did not yet understand. That every second of silence was being stored, and that the clock had already started. The cell door closed at 2:47 in the afternoon, and somewhere across the city, 14 years of federal service sat waiting to walk back through that door. The precinct moved the way it always did on a Tuesday afternoon. Officers filed paperwork at their desks, radios crackled with routine calls, and the holding area in the back processed the usual stream of arrests without much conversation. Nobody paid special attention to the man who had just been brought in. He was cuffed, logged, and placed in a cell like everyone else, and the officers who processed him didn't ask many questions because Dale Harris hadn't given them many answers. There was no formal charge written down, no incident report filed, just a black man in plain clothes sitting in a cell at 2:47 in the afternoon, and a precinct that didn't think anything about it was unusual. Damon Webb sat on the bench inside that cell and said nothing. He didn't bang on the bars. He didn't demand a phone call. He didn't raise his voice or threaten anyone. He just sat there with his hands in his lap and his eyes forward, because 14 years in federal law enforcement had taught him something most people never learn: that the loudest thing a man can do in a moment like that is stay completely calm. Every minute that passed was evidence. Every person who walked by that cell and did nothing was part of the record. He understood that better than anyone in that building. Watch Commander Raymond Okafor had been running the floor of that precinct for 9 years. He was not a man who missed things. He walked the holding area twice every shift. Not because procedure required it, but because he had learned early in his career that the holding area was where the most important information lived. Who was brought in, how they were brought in, and whether the paperwork matched the person sitting in the cell. It was a habit that had saved him from being connected to other people's mistakes more than once. He came through the holding area at just after 4 p.m., and he almost kept walking. But something made him slow down at Damon's cell. Maybe it was the way the man was sitting. Too still, too composed. The kind of stillness that doesn't come from resignation, but from discipline. Maybe it was the fact that there was no charge sheet clipped to the cell door. Whatever it was, Okafor stopped. He looked at the booking log in his hand, then looked at the man in the cell and asked one question. "What are you in for?" Damon looked at him without any urgency. "You should probably check your federal database before anyone answers that question." Okafor didn't react visibly. He was the kind of man who had trained himself not to. But he walked back to his office faster than usual, sat down at his computer, and pulled up the federal law enforcement database. He typed in the name from the booking log. The result came back in less than 10 seconds, and Raymond Okafor sat very still for a moment, reading the screen twice to make sure he was reading the right name, sure he was seeing what he thought he was seeing. Damon Webb, Special Agent, Federal Bureau of Investigation, 14 years of service, currently assigned to an active undercover operation. Okafor leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling. In 9 years as watch commander, he had dealt with a lot of 911 calls and situations that required careful handling, but nothing that looked like this. What was sitting in his holding cell wasn't just in wrongful arrest. It was a federal agent who had been physically dragged from his vehicle, ignored when he presented his credentials, and locked up by officers who either didn't know what they were doing or didn't care. And based on what Okafor already knew about Dale Harris, he had a strong feeling it was the second one. He picked up his phone and made 3 calls in quick succession. The first was to the precinct captain. The second was to the city's legal department. The third was to the FBI field office, because protocol required it, and because Okafor was smart enough to know that the moment he found out a federal agent was sitting in his holding cell, the clock on his own accountability started running too. He was not going to be the man who knew and did nothing. By the time he walked back to the holding area, the precinct had already started to change. He could feel it before he could see it. Voices dropped lower. Officers who had been relaxed at their desks were now sitting up straighter. Someone had already told someone else. And the information was moving through the floor the way bad news always does. Fast and quiet at the same time. Okafor unlocked the cell himself. He stood in the doorway and looked at Damon Webb, who had not moved from the bench, and said the only thing there was to say. "Agent Webb, I apologize. You're being released immediately." Damon stood up slowly. He straightened his jacket, looked at Okafor for a long moment, and walked out of the cell without saying a word. He didn't need to. The FBI field office had already been called. The city's legal department was already on the line. And Dale Harris, who at that moment was sitting at his desk filling out unrelated paperwork and thinking the afternoon had gone just fine, had no idea that the next knock on a door was 100% unrelated to the paperwork he was filling out, going to be meant for him. The precinct that had processed Damon Webb like he was nobody was about to find out exactly who he was. When the FBI field office got that call from Watch Commander Okafor, they didn't send a junior agent to handle it. They sent 2 senior investigators, a federal liaison officer, and a representative from the Department of Justice who had driven across the city in under 30 minutes. That kind of response doesn't happen for a routine wrongful arrest. It happens when the people receiving the call already know the name of the precinct, already have a file on the department, and have been waiting for something exactly like this to give them the opening they needed. because this wasn't the first time Damon Webb's name had come up in connection with Dale Harris. 8 months earlier, while Damon was deep in his undercover operation, a complaint had been quietly filed internally at the FBI field office. One of Damon's colleagues had flagged a pattern of targeted stops in the area where Damon was working. Stops that were happening too close to his cover, too frequently, and always involving black men in plain clothes driving alone. The complaint named Harris specifically. It was passed to the city's police oversight board. The oversight board reviewed it, noted that Harris had no criminal convictions, and closed the file in 11 days. Nobody told Damon. Nobody told the FBI. The file just disappeared into the same drawer where the other 8 complaints about Dale Harris had been sitting for 12 years. That drawer was about to be forced open in front of everyone. The internal investigation that followed Damon's arrest moved faster than any departmental review in that city's history. Within 48 hours, federal investigators had pulled every complaint ever filed against Dale Harris and cross-referenced them against arrest records, patrol logs, and body camera footage going back 4 years. What they found was not a surprise to anyone who had been paying attention. But seeing it all laid out in a single federal document made it impossible to look away from. Harris had conducted 94 stops in a 28-month period in the same 3-block radius where Damon had been parked. 81 of those stops involved black men. 67 of those men had no criminal record. 32 of them had filed complaints afterward. Every single complaint had been reviewed by the same supervising sergeant, a man named Lieutenant Gary Foss. And every single one had been dismissed within 2 weeks with the same language, and insufficient evidence to support disciplinary action. 32 times. The exact same words, like it had been copied and pasted from a template designed specifically to make problems disappear. But it got harder than that. When investigators pulled the body camera footage from the day, they discovered that the suspect had been wearing a black hoodie with a white logo. The logo was a simple design, but it was clear that the suspect had been wearing it for a long time. The hoodie was also covered in dirt and grime, indicating that the suspect had been out in the elements for an extended period of time of Damon's arrest. They found something that made the federal liaison officer put his pen down and sit back in his chair. Harris's body camera had been manually switched off before he approached Damon's vehicle. Tarek's camera had malfunctioned, which was the word used in the incident report filed 2 hours after the arrest. Equipment malfunction. Except when the technical team examined Tarek's camera, they found that the malfunction hadn't been caused by a drop or an impact. It had been caused by a manual override. Someone had turned it off from the inside, and the timestamp on that override was 4 minutes before Harris ever knocked on Damon Webb's window. They had planned it. This was not 2 officers who got caught making a bad decision in the heat of the moment. This was 2 officers who saw a black man sitting in a car, made a decision about what they were going to do, and then turned off their cameras before they did it. That single detail changed everything about how the case was classified. It moved it from misconduct to a coordinated civil rights violation, which meant it was no longer just a departmental matter. It was a federal one. And then the investigators started pulling the records of every officer who had worked alongside Harris in the last 5 years. What came back was a network that nobody wanted to see written down on paper. 6 officers who had been present during Harris's stops and filed no reports. 4 supervisors who had received verbal complaints directly and logged none of them. 2 lieutenants, including Gary Foss, who had not only buried the written complaints, but had actively recommended Harris for a commendation 18 months earlier. While 32 dismissed complaints were sitting in the file right below the recommendation letter. 17 names in total. Not all of them had dragged anyone across concrete. Some of them had simply chosen, over and over again, to look the other way. But federal law doesn't distinguish between the man who commits the act and the men who protect him from its consequences. They were all part of the same system. They had all made the same choice. And now that choice had a federal case number attached to it. When the findings were presented to the precinct captain, he reportedly sat in silence for a long time before he spoke. The man who eventually broke that silence wasn't him. It was the DOJ representative who closed the folder on the table, looked around the room, and said something that everyone in that building already knew, but nobody had ever been forced to say out loud. This didn't start with Damon Webb. Damon Webb is just the one you couldn't make disappear. The city had been running this system for years, quietly, efficiently, and it had worked perfectly. right up until the moment it didn't. The morning after Damon Webb walked out of that cell, the city's police department issued a one-sentence statement saying the incident was under internal review. No names, no apology, no acknowledgement of what had actually happened. It was the kind of statement designed to make a story go away quietly. And it might have worked if the FBI hadn't already taken the case out of the city's hands entirely. The federal investigation moved without asking anyone's permission. Within 72 hours of Damon's arrest, Dale Harris was placed on immediate suspension without pay. His partner Glenn Tarwick was suspended the same afternoon. But the investigators weren't finished. They had 17 names on that list, and they worked through every single one of them with the same cold efficiency that Harris had used to bury 32 complaints over 12 years. Lieutenant Gary Foss, the man who had dismissed every single one of those complaints with copied and pasted language, was removed from his position on the fourth day and escorted out of the building while his colleagues watched. Nobody said a word as he left. By the end of the second week, the badges were gone, fired, forced into early retirement, demoted so far down that the title meant nothing anymore. 17 officers in total, each one connected to a pattern of behavior that had been allowed to exist because the people responsible for stopping it had chosen repeatedly and deliberately to let it grow. Some of them had been on the force for over a decade. One was 3 months away from full retirement. It didn't matter. Federal civil rights violations don't make exceptions for tenure or timing. The city settled the lawsuit for $10 million. That number didn't come from nowhere. It was built from 14 years of Damon Webb's federal service being disregarded in under 30 seconds. It was built from the 81 black men Harris had stopped in 28 months. It was built from 32 complaints that were never meant to go anywhere. The settlement required the city to formally acknowledge a systemic failure in its oversight process. Not suggest it, not imply it, but put it in writing and sign it. That acknowledgement was worth more than the $10 million, because money can be written off. A signed admission cannot. Damon Webb returned to his federal duties without giving a public statement. He didn't hold a press conference. He didn't sit down for interviews. He went back to work the same way he had always worked, quietly, and with his record doing the talking. But the people who knew him said that something about the way he carried himself after that day was different. Not broken, not bitter, just different. The kind of different that happens when a man goes through something that confirms exactly what he already knew about the world, and has to decide what to do with that confirmation. What this case left behind was not just 17 empty desks and a $10 million line in the city's budget. It left behind a question that the department is still being forced to answer. How many men came before Damon Webb, filed their complaints, and never got their answer? How many of those 32 were still waiting? Because the only reason this case existed at all was because one of the men Harris targeted happened to have the federal power to make it impossible to ignore. And that is not justice. That is luck dressed up to look like accountability. If this story made you feel something, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and drop in the comments. Do you think those 17 officers got what they deserved, or should the consequences have gone further?